This is Claire McCaig reading from The Rosetta Man. Estlin Hume was ignoring the squirrel on his bedside table. The squirrels in the closet and under the bed were easy to ignore. They'd settled in and were dreaming quietly. But the one on the table wanted to place a hand on his pillow. It wanted to line a nest with his dark hair. Any violation of the no squirrels on the bed rule would force Estlin to get up, fetch bricks and chicken wire, and deal with the latest security breach. So he was trying not to think about the squirrel, because thinking about squirrels only encouraged squirrels to think about him. The cell phone on his bedside table buzzed. The squirrel became a projectile, leaping onto the window curtains. Estlin's nerves jumped with it. He jerked against the bed, as though waking from a dreamed fall. The phone hit the floor as he fumbled for it, with fingers that felt like they were the wrong size. Squirrels bounded around the room. One of them bounced against the window pane. The others scattered and climbed, collectively forgetting that they'd broken in through the eaves of the old farmhouse and not a gap from the attic into the closet. Estlin grabbed the phone, checking the caller display. The caller ID was restricted. Hello? Lindy, are you home? Harry? Estlin recognized the voice immediately. Harry lived on the other side of the world and never paid attention to time zone. Are you home, Lindy? I'm in bed. Estlin sat up, leaning against the headboard. He raised a hand to quiet the squirrels. Good, you're home. I assumed you were home. He's home, Harry called out. Estlin reached for the lamp, needing light. What time is it? It's 9 o'clock here. What's that there, late or early? Both. The old wood clock on the wall suggested it was 2 a.m. I've got a job for you. Harry was a professor and possum expert who often sidelined with other species, work that ranged from rat control to contracts with wealthy individuals who could afford a specialist when their exotic pets seemed depressed. An exciting job. I don't like exciting jobs. Yes, you do. Estlin slid under his light blanket and contemplated the rain damage on his ceiling. His last working holiday with Harry had cost him too much, especially if you considered the medical bills. I can't afford your jobs, he said. This one pays. 40 grand for 5 days, plus travel. Estlin froze. He lifted the phone from his ear and wondered why Harry was calling from an unlisted number. What kind of job is this? The kind where we don't talk about it until you're down here. A species? Can't say, Harry answered. Lindy, you can't miss this. Pack now. Don't pack. Grab your toothbrush. Your ride is on its way. 40 grand? No camels. I promise. Harry hung up. Estlin looked at the phone. The squirrels regarded him expectantly. I'm leaving, he said, and rolled out of bed. He pulled on a pair of jeans and slipped his wallet into the back pocket and dug through his underwear drawer for his passport. Stopping at the window, he heaved it open, propping the sash with a stick that he kept on the windowsill. All of you, out. Out. The squirrels did not want to go. It was a constant side effect of his extreme involuntary empathy with animals. It made him a useful assistant for Harry, but otherwise complicated his life. When he asked them directly, the squirrels said he was tasty, filling, warm, soft, smelly, furry, and shiny. These were truthful answers, but incomplete. The squirrels didn't have a sensory or conceptual symbol for what it was they liked about him. He was just shiny. He was so shiny that they gathered from miles around to find out what was shiny and stayed to bask in the glow. This caused problems. He'd been expelled from 3 universities and 1 veterinary college. He'd given up on urban and suburban living because among every set of neighbors there was a kind, tree-loving soul, a concerned citizen who watched in horror as a horde of bark-stripping squirrels killed every tree in an expanding death zone around him. The tree lovers were compelled to phone municipal bylaw offices, wildlife conservation societies, animal welfare, and the police. This was problematic, especially as the issue was never resolved by fines or injunctions. Several of the offended parties had ultimately turned to their gardening sheds, where sharp implements lined the walls. Estlin did not like having axes swung at him. Having been assaulted with gardening tools on 3 separate occasions, he couldn't dismiss the events as freak and unlikely happenings. People prone to making helpful suggestions usually felt he should get a cat, not realizing that this would only lead to untold levels of carnage. He'd tried houses and high-rises and had lost every damage deposit. He'd camped in a condemned mine, a low point, and he had lived on a cabin cruiser for a record 6 months until it sank. When he inherited the farmhouse from a reclusive uncle, from his first view of its peeling paint and sagging deck, he'd seen the beauty of the place. The isolated house was on the southwestern edge of Alberta, next to a provincial park and miles from the nearest active farm. It wasn't perfect. Work was hard to find. The squirrels still gathered, and every storm stole shingles from the roof. But he didn't have to worry about being hacked to death by an irate neighbor whose sanity had been gnawed away by the tree rats. At 33, Estlin accepted his lack of ambition. His squirrel affliction had made keeping a job impossible, so he'd never linked his happiness to advances on a career path. Now he owned 12 acres of wild grass. If he could keep the roof above him, he might be able to live an unremarkable life, perhaps even get a dog, if he could find one willing to ignore squirrels. Out. Now. Estlin pointed at the window. The squirrels tipped their heads and thought about it. He glared at them. Out! Bright stars and the quarter moon cast dim light on the flat expanse of tall grass. He heard the distant rumble of prairie thunder. The rumble broke into a grating roar as a bright floodlight swept over the house. The squirrels shot out the window and galloped across the roof as a Harrier jump jet did a wheels-down, dirty pass, taking 3 shingles with it. A blast of heat swept into the room. Estlin yanked the stick from the window, letting it drop closed. The Harrier turned, then inexplicably paused, hovering on the raw power of its downward directed engine before descending vertically into his backyard. The deafening engine swallowed and whined as it shut down. The canopy slid back. What the... Estlin stepped away from the window and grabbed a green t-shirt from the floor. He pulled it on and leaned forward to look out again. The pilot was climbing from the cockpit. Running to the hall, he nearly killed himself careening down the stairs, his feet ahead of his brain. In the kitchen, he stopped to check reality. The Harrier was still in his yard. He stepped into his sandals on the kitchen mat and opened the back door. The pilot was on his deck, with her hand raised to knock.